Good evening, everybody. I'm your host, Julian Ortiz of the Big O Podcast, and today I am joined again by my fellow Scorpios, sports fanatics, and host of the Good Rookies Podcast, which episode 6, Good Business, is available now wherever you get your podcasts. Faheem, Nelly J, how are you guys doing today?
Excellent, my dear. Excellent. I'm not too pleased with the first game of the NBA Finals. I must say, I kind of wanted the Heat to give the Lakers a little bit more pressure. Okay, I don't want this to be an easy ring. Actually, someone told me how the Lakers have 4 Hall of Famers on their team, and I'm like, did LeBron create a super team again? I don't know. All I know is that it's been a good week. I'm hoping the NBA Finals will go to at least 7 games because I want basketball to last as long as possible.
Right.
Other than that, man, I am good. I'm blessed.
Yeah, same. Happy to be here, honestly. You extended the invite, and it's always great talking with you. You're like a great conversationalist, so I'm excited.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, the history about tonight's recording is that we actually did an episode 2 days ago, and I ran into some technical difficulties and unfortunately was unable to recover the great conversation that we had. So I'm very thankful that you were willing to come back and do another episode. And it's so crazy because so much has changed in 2 days.
Wow.
2 days ago, we were talking about, Doc Rivers and his fate when he had resigned from the LA Clippers. We hadn't had game 1 of the NBA Finals. The Blue Jays were actually still in the playoffs. So there's a lot to sort of unpack for today's episode. Number one, I do want to address Nelly's terrible comments about the Lakers losing game 1. Come on now.
Laker fan. That's why. Look at you wearing the Lakers sweater too. You just had to put it on today, huh?
And then I had to throw my 2 Shaq jerseys in the back.
I see that too. I'm like, you're all team Lakers, Shaq.
And then the LA Galaxy jerseys in the background. So it's all LA today.
You just had to punch it in the face, right?
Listen, it's if you wanted a 7-game series, the game 1 was the game 1 results, not just the points on the board, but the injury, the ankle roll of Jimmy Butler, Dragic now being hurt, Bam Adebayo now being questionable for game 2. I mean, it's one of those, can Miami sort of rebound and Tyler Hero step up and be the guy that he had been prior to the NBA Finals? Or is it going to be that the Lakers now can put their knee, terrible reference, I'm going to go with foot on the neck of the Miami Heat, and really finish the series off, right? Put them in a 2-hole deficit. This is the first time the Miami Heat have lost game 1 this playoff round, or this NBA playoffs.
Yeah.
And so it's Eric Spoelstra is going to earn his money right now because it's going to be tough for him to try to come up with a game plan, missing 2 guys who he counted on so long in this playoffs.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right. I mean, I would say that Jimmy, his heart is so strong. So like Jamal Murray, I think Jimmy I'm just hoping that they can find a way. Like what happened in the second half, how they had that big run, Lakers in the big run, and just demolished all hope for Miami in game 1. But it's only game 1. We've seen LeBron be down game 1 and everyone be like, wow, the Lakers, they might not make it. And then, like a LeBron's face on the bench, right?
That's right.
His face. And now everyone knows when that face happens, be careful. So I feel like Jimmy had that face on game 1. Yep. So let's see how he can come back. But now because of the injury that happened yesterday with Dragic, I feel like it'll probably be 6 games to Lakers. But honestly, man, like I feel like Kobe's watching down and it's just been ordained. Like literally, this is the year for them to win. I've always said that if LeBron wants to win a ring with the Lakers, it has to be this year. So if they had the league canceled and wait till next year, I don't think LeBron would have had a better chance. But I think this is the one year that they can actually take it due to just what has happened. And I know every game they're like, it's for Kobe, it's for Gigi. So I think all that, it kind of seems like it's destiny for the Lakers to win. And the NBA wants that anyway. So
of course
they might get that for Christmas.
Yeah, for me, nothing's changed. I had Lakers in 6. I gave maybe Miami a 1 or 2. And nothing's changed. I mean, my theory was real quick. It's just if Bam goes out, and this is what I was saying, and I'm sticking to it. If Bam goes out, who's the big man that's going to take over for Miami? And then you go to Olynyk and you go to Miles Leonard. I was like, that's not enough for Anthony Davis and JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. And like the front court for Lakers just way too much. Yeah. And Bam had that issue in game 1, and it's proven to be the case at this point. So.
And it's funny because up until last night, I actually forgot that Danny Green traveled with the Lakers to Disney World. I actually thought they like left him at home, but it was nice to see that, you know, he actually dressed for a game and decided to show up and try to get some buckets, because he has been like one of the worst storylines for the Lakers this year, when they were hoping to sort of bring in that, you know, championship mentality and that skill set and be able to drop threes. And he had not been able to. KCP, man, stand up. What a stud so far in this NBA Finals. He was really the engine that kept the Lakers in the game and gave them energy when they had the awful first quarter start against Miami. Yeah. So shout out KCP.
That game with Danny Green, I must say, that's the best playoff game that Danny Green's had since last time he had a game like that was when he was in a San Antonio Spurs uniform.
Thank you. The same thing. You know what's funny? I'm like, last year when the Lakers drafted Danny Green for the playoffs, I was like, did you not watch the Raptors playoffs last year? Like, who was? Because to me, like, if you're in Toronto and you watch the Raptor playoff, that the biggest flop show, the biggest flop of our team was Danny Green. He was obsolete the entire NBA playoff series. So if they drafted Danny Green for playoffs, that scout, whoever they have for that scout, should be fired, because he did nothing for us in the playoffs last year.
Well, here's the thing. Maybe he shows up in the NBA Finals. Maybe he is that piece that, you know, does have some decent numbers that helps them stay afloat and hit big threes, because the threes have always been the Lakers' sort of Achilles heel, right? Especially through the season, they've either shut the lights out or it's been terrible, but they've been on the terrible side more often than not. And so since we last chatted, I mentioned this off the top, Doc Rivers. You know, you guys are Toronto Raptors sports fans. I obviously loved when Doc was in LA, because it meant that it was guaranteed that the Clippers weren't getting to the NBA final.
Right.
And so my question for you is, you know, he signs with the 76ers today, and he wasn't the front runner. It was supposed to be Mike D'Antoni. So he sort of sneaks in there with this Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, this team, Robert Covington. What do you think this means for the Philadelphia 76ers moving on from Brett Brown? Are you worried at all from a Toronto Raptors perspective to have to deal with Doc again back in the East? Or are you hoping he took that Clipper magic with him to Philly, which means you don't have to worry about them come playoff time?
I'll take Clipper magic. I really think he really has Doc's, I think, best years. He did like very well early in his career. So Coach of the Year, he won a championship in Boston, 1 out of 3. But him coming to the Sixers right now is just kind of like, he has the young talent, sure, but I still think that his career is kind of running off of fumes right now in regards to he's living off of yesterday's successes. So I mean, is it an upgrade? I mean, sure.
My thoughts is, welcome to the East, Doc.
Welcome back.
Welcome. You will not make it past the second round, but we appreciate you coming through. No, but real talk. The Philadelphia Sixers, they're a mess. Like, I feel like they're just a hot mess. Their team is not equipped to win a ring in any era. I just feel like they need to make changes to their team. Like, I think Doc is great. Maybe Doc can help them, because Doc is a loved coach by other players in the league. So having him there may attract players to want to go there. But their team but their team needs to like improve. So to me, adding Doc alone will not change their issue. They need changes. Their team is not built for championship or for longevity. So I just feel like they're gonna have to make changes anyway. So maybe Doc is more like a chess play. You know, like, you know, I bring in Doc to bring in maybe 2 or 3 players that love Doc enough to come to Philadelphia. But I'm not seeing Doc as a game changer for Philly to like win the ECF. No, I'm not.
I see this. I see this as Lob City East.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean the point what I was wanted to say was
Hold up, you're saying that Blake Griffin? Okay, so Chris Paul is who? Who's Chris Paul? Who is Blake? And who is?
Oh, Chris Paul is
Andre.
no, Chris Paul is actually Ben Simmons, point guard, and then Blake Griffin we'll say is Embiid, and it doesn't matter. Regardless, whatever the talent he had in Lob City, it's still Lob City East.
But it's interesting because you bring the comparison to the LA Clippers, right? The LA Clippers had to make a change. It wasn't working under Doc. They had to make a change, but the same thing applies. The roster, the way that it's built right now, is missing something. Yes. There was something off about that roster that needs to change. And so they decided to make a change because they spent all this money and traded all of these picks in order to win a championship, and it wasn't working. So they decided to hire whomever they're going to hire. Same thing with Philly, right? Philly was trust the process. Take all these first round picks. We're going to be bad for so long. Embiid's going to miss 2 seasons. Simmons is going to miss a season. The Markelle Fultz pick didn't really work out for us. We need a change. And so now you bring in a guy like Doc Rivers, who, Nelly, as you said, I think is going to be a little bit of structure that maybe Brett Brown wasn't. Mm-hmm. Maybe we're bringing in a coach that has experience, and maybe now we'll buy into him a little bit more. And the third factor is maybe someone will want to go and play for Doc in the East to help that Philadelphia team.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a smart move. I mean, D'Antoni was rumored to be the front guy, but they would have had to make changes to fit his system, trading either an Embiid or Ben Simmons. So it'll be interesting to see what Philly does now with their new management to see how they're going to build this team. Are they going to blow it up? But I don't think you bring Doc in for a rebuild. I think you sort of retool and see where you're going to be at. What do you think, Faheem?
What you said makes sense. Actually, I can't even disagree with anything. Maybe if I can add to that, just say Philadelphia for maybe the last 6 years. Remember they tanked, and They were every year they were just getting number 1 picks and number 2 picks, and taking these picks and not investing the time in these picks and just flipping them, sending them away for nothing. So they never find themselves getting ahead. So I mean, Doc, keep in mind he was a general manager in LA for the Clippers. He's a general manager / coach. So he was making a lot of these decisions. He was relieved of his position. He went just back to being a coach the last 2 years now. But they have Elton Brand there in Philadelphia right now. So I don't know. I just think it's, you know what, if you're in Philadelphia right now and you're really not happy with the process, it's a good feel-good story, because having Doc, it can kind of give some hope to the fan base.
For sure.
But there's nothing that's happening with Doc Rivers that I don't see him as any kind of mastermind that's going to do anything outside of, just take a really good core and make them just average.
Like Phil Jackson said, it's Game 7, it's Doc. We're not concerned.
Yeah.
I mean,
East, we're not concerned either. Like we're not, the Raptors are not like, oh my gosh, Doc is not, like, we're not concerned.
No,
we're not.
It's interesting because Doc, I mean, you alluded to 2010, I think was the first time. Was it 2010 where the Boston Celtics won the NBA championship?
Yeah,
I want to say it's actually 2008 or 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was that. I think the Lakers actually won in 2010. I should probably know this. But it's interesting because Doc actually took the most amount of games in order to win a championship. He set the record for needing to play the most amount of games, which I think... off the top of my head, it was probably like 15 or 16 to win a championship.
So you're saying first round, like that sounds like a game 6, game 7, game, like you're saying he went the distance in all of them, you're saying.
He had the longest road to an NBA championship in the history of winning a title. So, I mean, I think Doc's a good coach. I think he's great. I mean, I think eventually sometimes they lose their magic. If you look at, Phil Jackson going to New York, that was a dumpster fire.
Well,
like
we knew New York. I mean, that owner of New York, like he is he is, come on. He's like bad luck for everyone. He needs to go. Until he goes, this will always be a joke. Always.
For sure. But the hard part is he owns so much. Mm-hmm. Like he owns so much. He owns MSG. His company owns MSG. It owns the Knicks. I mean, he had owned the property that was just sold to Steve Ballmer to move the Clippers, and he was fighting tooth and nail to prevent that from happening.
Right.
But it's interesting. I don't think the Raptors have anything to worry about other than their roster, because in the last week or so since the elimination from the bubble till about now, we've heard Marc Gasol is going to leave.
There's a rumor. They're saying like so. I got a source that told me that someone actually contacted Barcelona, the team Barcelona, and they said that no one has actually spoken to Marc Gasol at all. So it's all fake rumors, but he might leave though. He might still retire. Sure. He might go to the.
Let's go forward like he is gone, because I think that seems like a logical choice.
And he's owed a lot of money too, right? So I mean, that's also not necessarily the worst contract to move on from.
No, definitely. So continue, Julian.
Especially in an off season where you have to look at what your plan is for Fred,
right?
Because you have one more year of OG being affordable. You have Norman Powell going into his last of his 3-year deal that he signed.
Right.
And you have to figure out, what do you do with Kyle Lowry?
Right.
So do you want to give him an extension? You've obviously already paid Pascal Siakam, so his extension's now going to start kicking in. But Freddie's really been, I want to say, the driving force. Kyle's been the leader, but Freddie's really taken this team since the NBA playoffs last year when he had his first kid and really put the team on his back. Now, if you let him go, you let Marc Gasol go, and you probably get another roster move here and there. Are you confident as Toronto Raptor fans that if you don't have the ability to sign a top free agent, that you will be in, the top 3, the top 4 in the East come next year?
No. I have. So with those moves that you mentioned in mind, I still feel even if we keep Fred VanVleet, I think this is not a rebuild, but this is a retool year.
Right.
Starting this year, I had us being in home court advantage in the playoffs. I had us in the top 4 at the start of the season. My approach going in, and I guess over the next few months, with the moves, maybe I might be flexible with this, but I'm seeing us in the playoffs, but near the bottom. I'm talking like 7 seed.
Wow.
Yeah, I think 6, 7 seed, maybe not scraping at 8th, but I see us really going, and there's no shame in that. Like, here's the thing, I think as Raptor fans, we've been spoiled. We've had these many years of being a dominant team in the East, but if you look at what we have in regards to our personnel, I'm just not seeing this, because the other teams are getting better. Brooklyn, they have KD and Kyrie coming back. So there's another slot and every other team seems to have the same chemistry and they're building off of it. Not a lot of changes. So, and that's not a shot at the Raptors. We all know Raptors to the end. That's a squad, but I'm a realist. I don't see us doing this same kind of miracles. I think the miracle time is over, and we're going to go to a little retooling for maybe next 2 years, I'll probably say.
So I kind of disagree. I think that for sure we're gonna sign. For sure we're gonna sign Fred back. Like, that's gonna happen. Nick Nurse has said it today. That's his priority. Masai said his priority is getting Fred back, and I trust in Masai. So whatever Masai wants to do, I'm cool with it. I think even if we were to lose Fred, Depot is out there. He's thinking about coming to Toronto. We have quite a few players. I think now is the best time because there are players now that actually want to come to Toronto. This is the first time we actually have people that want to be in our culture. They see our team. We've won a ring. I think we've now won over the toxicity of playing in Canada. So I think that has now been changed, and I think people actually want to play in our city because they know if you're in Toronto, you have Canada behind you. You have enough endorsements. You make a lot of money because you have a country behind you. Wherever you go, you will definitely be an all-star because we vote for all our all-stars. So I feel like we're going to get people that want to come here. I've seen, I think, was it Montreal wants to come here? He's posting Raptor pictures and shirts today on Instagram. So I just feel that we're going to get folks that want to come play with us. So I'm hoping, so for sure, we're going to send Fred back. My only concern is Serge. Serge is getting paid, I think, 22, 23 mil?
It's a lot of money.
And he wants to get paid more. Can we afford Serge? That's the question. Because our priority is Fred over Serge. So if we get Fred, can we afford Serge, right? And if we get Depot, can we trade Depot for a Norm? Like, we have pieces to play here, right? I don't know, right? I'm saying like, no, of course Norm is something else, but I'm saying like, we have pieces to play here, and I feel like Masai has a good painting. Now, in 2 years, we'll have no contracts if everything goes as planned. So we can actually, in 2 years, like Faheem said, we can actually build from to scratch a brand like new team that has championship caliber, all that stuff as well, with Siakam there, keeping OG. So I don't know, like I feel like yes, 1 year might be a little dip. I don't think it'll be 7, maybe like I think 4 or 5, like mid. Because I think Brooklyn will go up for sure. Brooklyn will go up. Boston, Brooklyn, Miami, Milwaukee. Those are like my top 4 for East next year. And I think 5 will be Raptors. 4 or 5, depending on if, listen, Kyrie's injury prone, so is KD. If they last the whole season, I'll be shocked. After speaking with doctors, we spoke to doctors this week, I was shocked, right? So I think we'll land 4 or 5. And if so, that's cool. But I think we'll still be in the playoffs next year. And I'm hoping if we sign Fred and with Nick Nurse, our mastermind, I don't know. I'm not concerned yet.
So I think this is, I mean, you said a lot of really great things. But I'm kind of surprised as Raptor fans that you both sort of left out the elephant in the room. And that is, what if Masai's not here? Sure, we trust in Masai, but what if he doesn't sign that extension? What if he does decide to leave? He obviously is one of the driving forces for the 2021 bring in Giannis.
Yes.
But what people also forget now is that the NBA had to look at how they were going to use and allocate their money for the next couple of years because of what happened with COVID. So the salary cap is not going to increase over the next 3 years. I believe the players actually have to give back some money. So the cap will stay where it's at for the next 3 years because of COVID. And so you have to look at, what are you going to pay OG? Because OG is going to come up in the same 2021. You have to look at what happens with Serge, what happens with Mark. Now, if you trade or you sign some of these guys, and for whatever reason, the cap doesn't go up extended past that, because they're looking at potentially having fans back in the seats in some arenas.
Yeah.
But Toronto may not even have a team playing in its country, because if there are still travel restrictions, Toronto, like the Blue Jays, like TFC, will have to play out of another stadium or arena somewhere in the United States. That also maybe takes away some of the home court advantage that they did have, being maybe a 3 or 4 seed, next year. Maybe they do dip down a little bit, further down, like a 6. I probably not an 8, but maybe like a 5, 6 is probably a good slide down spot, because you don't have Jurassic Park. But if Masai doesn't come back, the big plan for a lot of Toronto Raptor fans is bring in Giannis, and he is connected to the Giants of Africa. He's really helped Giannis when he was just, this unknown player from Greece. If Masai doesn't come back, if we lose our trust, in Masai, and he's not here, and it's Bobby Webster who now has to really just fully take over the reins, do we have a chance at still bringing in Giannis and bringing in the players that Masai has helped build the culture for? Or do we sort of lose out on that moving forward? And I don't want to say start at square one, but we're definitely not where we're at, where the Masai sort of helped us get.
Nelly J.
I will say Masai ain't going nowhere. Damn it, for 200. Okay, that's my thoughts. Okay, so a few things, right? Good point. If Masai does leave, we will lose that leverage. Masai is definitely being the only Black president in the NBA. A lot of players love him. A lot of GMs adore him. A lot of owners wish to have him. And I think that Masai and the owners of the Maple Leafs group, right, who owns Raptors, they I remember an interview this week, they said that literally they're like, we're gonna do whatever Masai wants. Like, if he wants an entire city, I don't care. Like, we're giving him anything he wants for him to stay. And because our team is not owned by a person, it's owned by like a board of group people, I think Masai prefers that. I think having an owner in your business and in like your ears all the time annoying you, Masai has free reign with the Raptors. Like, he's no owner saying, hey, Masai, what do you do? Why do you, like, he has no questioning on his decisions, right? So I think Masai has that type of power here that he won't get in other teams. Because in the States, these teams are owned by owners, and these owners are inna. They're like inna your business. So
yeah,
I just feel that Masai likes it here. His kids, his wife love Canada, and I really don't. I can't see him like having his family move from Toronto in the city to go somewhere else. And I think if the owners of Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto Raptors can definitely move mountains for Masai to keep him here, I think they will. But if he does leave, you're right. I think it'll be demise. But I really can't see Masai wanting to leave the culture that he's built. He's built it from scratch, right? And this is his baby. So to leave your baby, I think it'll be hard for him to actually to leave here, to be honest.
Julian, you pose a really good question. No, that's tough. So I'll say this, Nelly J, what you said, I agree with everything you say. But I'm going to entertain the fact that Masai does leave and go elsewhere. If he does leave, go elsewhere, and with that for Bobby Webster, not a shot at Bobby Webster, because it's like Popovich, coaches come to San Antonio is like that, being groomed and mentored by Popovich. It says something, it holds weight. You know what I'm saying? I think Bobby Webster being groomed and mentored by Ujiri, it's going to hold weight. Like, we can actually put some trust in him that, just the fact that Masai took him to work under him and work with him, that's speaking something about Bobby Webster to begin with. Like, he obviously has some skill in what he's doing, right?
Right.
Do I trust Bobby Webster to be like Masai? Obviously not, because there's a secret sauce and there's things that that he knows, right? But I will say, if Masai does leave, we are in a predicament. You're right, because the whole Giannis dream, it's over. Getting free agents, it's not over, because I think the Raptors, we have built a culture and we have a great rep around the league, right?
Right.
Especially what happened with the buses for Black Lives Matter. Being the only team going down, like things like that, says volumes about the organization. So the organization, we're actually seeing, I could see by players, is a destination where there's a culture that's being built. Does the culture leave because Masai leaves? I wouldn't necessarily say yes, because his fingerprints is all over the organization. But you do have a good point, though. And I've never really entertained the if, but at this case, if he does leave, we are in a situation where it's, we really have to, we might go through some tough times, I think. I think it's possible. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, if Masai leaves, it creates, Toronto ends up looking like most other NBA teams. And when I say that, I mean white GM, white owners. So you sort of lose some of that star that Masai has in looking different, in being different, in having all of his ties for taking the NBA game outside of America to Canada to Africa to everywhere across the world. Masai is sort of the figurehead. Now, if you asked anybody outside of maybe the Toronto fan base who Bobby Webster was, I guarantee you nobody would have thought that they would have known Bobby Webster was a GM. They would have thought Masai was the guy making all the moves. And I'm sure they do it part and parcel. They do it together because Masai doesn't want to step on Bobby's toes, but he also is, the guy who's sort of making these deals, like the Kawhi deal and putting us in the conversation for Giannis. I would hope that they give him everything he wants, but I think that if Masai leaves, it's not because Toronto didn't offer him the world. It's because Masai has decided that he wants to take on a new challenge somewhere else, whether that's, go to New York and fix that terrible franchise, because if he brings them back into prominence, if he wins them an NBA title, as much as Raptor fans want to think that Toronto being a Canadian team was big, if he turns around the New York Knicks,
that's a miracle.
No, 100%. I mean, if the Knicks make the playoffs, it's a big deal. For sure, yeah, with a championship, you know. Honestly, what I'm saying? So
if Masai can make the Knicks, and I think that's why the owner wants Masai, but the owner has a bad rep. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I think, like, at the end of the day, like, we all want a job that we would want to go to work and have our owners or our bosses trust us enough to leave us the hell alone. And I just feel that the Raptors ownership group does that for Masai. And I think that's rare in the NBA. I think a lot of these owners are involved in everything. And if you go against them and you do lose, you get fired. Because we see a lot of coaches getting fired all the time because they didn't do what the owners want to do. Not the GMs, but the owners want to do. So,
right.
and like, again, right, you're an owner, you hire people to do their job, but you don't trust them doing their job. You know, it's weird. So the culture that Connor had, I think it's so magnetic. And I do agree with Faheem, like if Masai was to leave, it would have to be for like, he must be bored. Like I am so bored.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go somewhere, but, or the player that he really, really likes from Africa that's coming here and he wants to help that player. Like it won't be for LeBron or for like a Steph Curry. He doesn't care about those guys.
Right. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to talk about Good Rookies podcast because you guys are hosts. You guys kill it. You guys have had some amazing guests on. I was fortunate enough to join you for episode 6, which was an amazing time.
You killed it, by the way.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's definitely different, you know, when you're on the other side of the microphone.
Right.
When you're leading the conversation to then all of a sudden be a guest on someone else's show, it can be a little bit challenging. But you know, you guys do a fantastic job of making us feel super comfortable. My guy Anson was incredible. I still think he beats Usain Bolt in a 40-meter dash. You heard it here first. Let's make it happen. But what I do want to know is, you know, how did, first of all, you and, you know, you guys, Faheem and Nelly J, how did you guys come together to decide, you know, let's make a podcast together?
So how do we make, let's make a podcast together. So I just had to wheel it back to actually when we first met. So this is going back maybe about 10 years ago. We used to work together at a call center. And I met her. She knew a lot about sports right from jump. I'm talking to her and I just knew, okay, you know what, like the dudes are talking and she's running her piece and she's holding her own. And it was pretty impressive. So we maintained having those kind of conversations. And then when we left the job, she went to her new position and I went to mine and life went on. I'm talking maybe there might have been like a 5-year gap, 6-year gap. Mm-hmm. And we met up by chance in the morning at Nelly J.
At the Raptors game 7 against Brooklyn.
That's right. Yeah. So we both woke up not knowing. We just like, we're in line for the game 7, 8:30 game. Game 7, it was at 1 o'clock. We're at Jurassic Park. And it's just like, whoa. So just things rekindled automatically. I was there with my friend. She was there with her friend. And we went in the park together. We watched the entire game together. And
cried together.
yeah. That was a very sad bus ride home. I'll tell you that.
Oh my gosh, long.
Yeah. So and we've always maintained like the conversation we have. It is natural. It's just like, you know, she speaks her piece, I speak my piece. If we disagree, we agree. It's always been like really a pleasure, like just talking to her. Period. Not just sports, but just in period. Like her as a person, she's just got good energy and good vibes, right? So after at that point, so actually what happened was we maintained numbers at that point, right? At Jurassic Park, Nelly J?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I, with a few friends, I was at their home and they were saying, hey, you know what? There was another friend of ours named Jeremy Machula. Shout out Jeremy Machula, actually. Shout out Jeremy. And me and him, we would always disagree. So people were saying, oh, you guys should do a podcast. Kind of like, you know, because at the time, First Take is something we were watching all the time. So hearing, and I think maybe at that time, it might have been Skip and Stephen A, actually. That's how long ago it was. The good old days, right?
The good old days.
Right. So that's kind of the stick. We would do that, argue all the time. So we went in, and after really our first session, I just found, you know, we had a good conversation, but I just felt maybe something was missing.
Right.
And that's when the Breakfast Club, we'd watch that also. So it's Charlemagne, DJ Envy, and Angela Yee. And instantly I was like, you know what? Nelly J came to mind right away. I was like, you know what? She would be a great person to add to this conversation. This is always, I have a third person in there who has a good opinion. I brought the idea to Jeremy. And at that point, I'll let you go, Nelly J, in regards to how your first interaction and how you got put on the podcast.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Fahim called me like, yo, I got an idea about a sports podcast. And I'm like, oh yeah, I love sports, right? So I was like, you know what? I think it's a great idea. You know, I love to talk. I can talk all day. And but but then he goes like, oh, but my friend Jeremy, he doesn't really believe me that like, you know, sports. So he's gonna call you to kind of just see like your sport IQ. And I'm like, okay, am I doing a tryout? Is this like
it's an interview.
American Idol? Do I have to like, me like, you know, don't think of my voice already. So Jeremy calls me. He asked me about my top receiver, like all these different questions in football, basketball, different things. And I guess I passed the test because he was like, because you know, he liked me after. So yeah, I was happy to join the team. And I was kind of like at that time, I wasn't a podcast person, so I didn't no idea what was going on. But Faheem was like, yo, trust me, it'll be good. And I trust Faheem because from time, like he's always been that like, you know, that always like forward thinking kind of person. So you know what, Faheem, if you think it's a good idea, I trust you, I'll do it. Let's try it out. So
and that was about 2000 and like about 3 years ago, 2017.
Yeah, I'll say like we probably I think 16, 17.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Wow. All right. So you guys are back before podcasting really sort of took off.
Right.
Because it's funny because COVID, you know, everybody, the joke was that if you started your podcast in 2020, like everybody had a podcast. Microphones are like selling out everywhere online. You couldn't do it. And it was an interesting time because everyone was trying to jump in the game, but it's always hard. You know, podcasting is there's so much content, not necessarily in competition with everybody else, but there's so many avenues and so many different takes. So how did you guys come up with the idea of a Toronto sports and cultured podcast? Like what were the origins of the idea around it?
I think it developed into that for him. Like I feel like it just became that, I think, after a while, because I will say when we first started, it was just straight sports. But then there were things happening in the world that we couldn't ignore, you know, and you know, being Black people in Toronto was happening. We started to add more culture elements, and then it became like, you know what? We're going to have a For the Culture segment just to make sure that we actually are touching on elements that we think is positive or negative to our culture. So I would say it's more progressive. But for him, I mean, like, I guess kind of talk about how we kind of started with the other podcast and then with Dromo and how we now became.
Right. So, it started off, like I said, there was the three of us, me, Jeremy, and Nelly J. Jeremy eventually, due to work and just time, just life changes, no longer wanted to go forward. So then we were stuck to say, okay, what do you want to do? At that time, I also have a friend, Jomo, who does our sound, and he's our behind the scenes person, like the silent fourth member. He's also, I'd have to say, you have someone in your group that is good just to bounce an idea off, and when it comes back to you, it's like you trust it. You trust the opinion, you know. So Jomo, he started off just listening to our podcast early, right? And I would just go to him and say, hey, what do you think? Because I'm always about constantly getting better at it, because it's a craft, right? So I was like, you know what, any constructive criticism, and he'd give it honestly. You know, he'd say, oh, you need to do this and cut this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm taking it. So just by his constructive criticism, it just kind of evolved, because Jomo in himself, he went to school for videography, and he was actually working. Mm-hmm. Sorry?
Editing.
Editing, right.
Editing,
right.
Videography,
Right, so that was his background. So I just said, hey, you know what? Like, that's your background. That's something that you do already. At the time, we didn't need it. But like Jay was saying about forward thinking, I'm thinking we may need this in the future. So why don't you just be part of the movement? And that's how he kind of came in the fold. And from there, it's just we had switched names once we no longer had the other member. And when we switched names, Nelly J, you want to get to that?
So we switched names to Zoned In Podcast. That was our name a year ago.
A year ago.
And it's funny. So we started Zoned In Podcast a year ago. I remember it was actually right after the Raptors championship, when the dust settled. We're like, you know what? We're like, we missed our podcasting, we missed talking, we missed having our takes out there. Because literally the stuff that I say and Faheem say is not said really in other shows. So we're like, you know what? We feel like our opinions are very different from what people are hearing. So we want a platform to kind of express our views from a Toronto Canadian point of view, which, as you know, in the media is very obsolete. So we missed it. We say, you know what? Let's go and come together. Jomo was on board, and we started Zoned In Podcast. So the challenge with Zoned In Podcast was that at the time we were recording on a set. So we recorded first only audio, then we got a set to have like visuals, but then things happened, and then we record probably had about like 8 episodes the first season, but it was due to weather. Like it was a snowstorm, we can't go to the set today, so like it wasn't on Zoom, and back then we were using Zoom last year, so it was challenging for us to kind of get the ball rolling and be consistent. That was our only challenge, was being consistent. So luckily though, we got a new set in January, and we're ready to go rock and roll again, and then boom, COVID hits.
Yeah, COVID changed the game, right? COVID didn't care what you were doing.
They didn't care.
Like they don't care what you're.
I don't care what you're doing.
It doesn't matter what your goals, your aspirations are. We're just gonna shut the world down, right? Like it wasn't even just like a local thing. It just shut every place across the globe down in different ways and for different amounts of time. Now, I do want to jump in real quick because, you mentioned the name of your podcast, the Zoned In Podcast. Now, you reached out a few weeks ago when we were trying to figure out, coming on the show. And I did a little bit of research and dived into, what you guys were doing. Because before you agree to do something, you want to know, what it is that, they're talking about. Are you a good fit? No one wants to go in there and look like a fool. So I'm going in there and I'm seeing all these videos under Good Rookies. And then I'm only seeing like 4 episodes at the time, and I'm like, wait a second, there's something that's not lining up here. So then I'm diving deeper, and I see this video called The Interlude. And I'm like, okay, so let me click on this. Let me start from the beginning. And you guys addressed the fact that you ran into some issues with what was named the Zoned In Podcast, and you had to sort of flip it and quickly recover into something different. And a few episodes ago, I had a friend from the Politics as Usual podcast, Reno. We talked about entrepreneurship and ownership and being 2 extremely important parts of when you're starting your new business, of all of these things to consider, right? Consider your logo, consider your concept, all of these things. But on the back end, and the most important thing is make sure that, you have like your trademarks or your LLCs, because what you don't want to have happen is create something, put all this time and effort into a concept, feed it, watch it grow up like a plant, and then at the last minute, have someone come and take it away from you. Because there's no worse feeling than like working so hard and putting in these hours and driving through snowstorms and having a set and going through all of these things to ultimately have it sort of not work out the way you want it to. And so how did we get from Zoned In Podcast to Good Rookies Podcast?
Me, brother.
Yeah.
Take so
I'm at a friend's house. He has a playlist on Spotify.
Oh, nice.
It's called Rap Gene. Shout out to No Home. And so I'm at his house, and at this point, like you'd mentioned, we're doing the video, but mind you, all this time, we're calling ourselves a podcast, but we're not being really consistent. I mean, if we can do an episode this week, it's great. If we can't, hey, they're gonna have to wait. That was kind of the attitude, right? And then we said, okay, you know what? Let's buckle down and let's actually start going on social platforms for podcasts and putting it out there. So I'm at his house, go to Spotify, and I typed in the name, and I saw someone had the name. So I thought for a second, hey, maybe I typed it in wrong, and I seen it. The name was clearly gone. I realized, okay, well, we had it on YouTube. They had it on the podcast platforms. And, at that time, I was a little taken aback for a moment because, clearly we didn't cover all our bases.
Right.
And it was a learning experience. I called Nelly J, and the next day and she was, you know, I thought she was gonna be a lot more, I wouldn't say upset, but a lot more hurt about it. But she took it like a champ. Nelly J, I'll let you go from there about
Yeah, I think sometimes like I always expect adversity. I don't know what it is, but I expect things to not go my way. I don't know if it's my life or my mentality, but when Faheem called me about it, I won't lie. Second, I was like, what the F? You know, and at that point, you know what? You have two options, right? Either you say, you know what, it's a sign. We're not meant to do this. Let's just scrap it. Or say, you know what? It's a sign. We're meant to do this. And because we have adversity, we have to push through it to prove that we deserve this, right? So he was like, you know what? Honestly, like Nelly, like clearly the name wasn't for us. Cause like if it was for us, it wouldn't have been taken by someone else. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely correct. Like, so clearly Zoned In wasn't for us. And like you said last time, Julian, from the ashes.
That's right.
Rise from the Phoenix.
That's right.
Great analogy. Right. The Phoenix, Good Rookies was born. And I'm in love with Good Rookies. And what was a 7-day turnaround for him? Like,
right. So we had a group chat, and so me, Nelly J, and Jomo were just throwing out names. Because to Nelly J's credit, I was more into saying, okay, you know what? Maybe we should pull back and take a moment and not record. And because at that time we were just getting the habit of having the mindset of like every week, let's drop an episode. And that's right when we were just zoning, like really getting into there, right? So we said, okay, we threw out a whole bunch of names, and it was called Zoned In. So then we said, like, we went through all different variations of the word zone just to kind of keep the elements of it. We, like I mentioned, we went with like we the zone, like all type of things, just trying to keep the zone out. And it was feeling like a circle and a peg, like it wasn't fitting. It felt like it was forced and not natural. So after a few days of just trying to find these, and we realized that word zoned is so oversaturated. I'm talking, there's podcasts out there that says the Zone podcast, the Zone podcast, there's like all type of, so we said, you know what, let's start. So that's where we took bounced names for about, I'll probably say 3-4 days. And by the 6th, 7th day, Good Rookies came out. And once Good Rookies came out, it's just like, we just felt like, hey, you know what, like this is it. And by the next, so by the next week, actually, so it's like literally 7 days later,
we
recorded as Good Rookies without the, like nothing happened. And, you know, just did the interlude and say, you know, if people are following us or little followers we had, give them the interlude and just keep the ball rolling and keep the momentum going. Right. So,
listen, I love the logo. I think the logo is one of the things that I first saw, and I was like, "Damn, that's like, it's like."
Tell him again, Julian. Let him know, like the logo.
It's simple, but it's like there are some really nice elements to it, right? Like you pay attention to it. You got like the soccer ball and I believe the basketball in there. I mean, I really like it. I was drawn to it. So I'm going back and I'm watching, you know, episode after episode. You know, you segment your show. You have usually 2 people from like the same occupation come on. So there's some, you know, familiarity with what people are doing. So I loved it. And I was like, you know, this is like First Take meets Breakfast Club, you know, meets barbershop talk. And
that's
I'm like,
exactly what our concept is. All of that in one.
Yeah. And so I loved it. I loved the fact that, you know, you prep the people going on before so they have an idea of what's going on. Unlike this podcast, I like to throw wrenches.
Like, you know what? Go deep. Nelly.
That's it. I like to catch you off guard because I like to see how you think.
Right.
And so that led to a question that I asked you guys on the first one. So which I do want to ask you again on this one. So now your arguments can be, you know, a little bit stronger. And that is, you know, if you had to pick one player from Toronto sports, any Toronto sports team, who do you think has been the most, I want to say, iconic? Now, the example was Russell Wilson in Seattle. People were saying that Russell Wilson, based on what he's doing and what he's done as a Seattle Seahawk, you know, you associate him with Seattle. He's the greatest athlete to play for any Seattle team. For Toronto, who is that athlete to you? Make that argument. Pick one. Make the argument. Who do you think is the most iconic player to ever play for a Toronto sports team?
Nelly J.
I should go first. I was the one to say the last time too. See, for him, Okay, and what I'll go first, but Julian, I'm sorry, I'm gonna fail the test because I can't just pick one. I remember last time it's hard because literally I'm gonna fail because literally Roberto Alomar and Joe Carter for me, that Blue Jays team. You know, I came to Canada from Trinidad as an immigrant. I wasn't really happy to come here because Trinidad has island, it has sun, it has rotis, everything. So come to this cold country, I wasn't really happy. But when I was living here and the Blue Jays had their run, and I saw immigrants like myself playing baseball. And actually, my first love before basketball was actually baseball. I remember my mom, please give me a glove so I can play like those guys. So I remember wanting to play baseball, but like I feel like those guys as an immigrant, I was like, wow, maybe I can make it in Canada. Seeing someone that looked like me playing in a sport and being adored by other people in the sport of Toronto, it kind of gave me more self-esteem to want to be here as an immigrant. So I feel like those guys, and they had an accent too. Like they weren't speaking proper, like they had an accent like me. And I had a Trini accent back then. So I have a connection with those guys. I think of Toronto sports, I think of that team and of those athletes more than the Raptors, of course, now, but like growing up as a kid, there was a Blue Jays man growing up. My first love for sports for Toronto. So I've got to go with those players. I'm sorry.
So according to your example, which you gave with Russell Wilson, because that's right. When you think Seattle sports, you're probably going to think Russell Wilson, you know?
Right.
Totally agree. Now it's hard with Toronto because there's people who would have reached a certain level of success that I could think of, but haven't, they've done it elsewhere also. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of hard to label this as a Toronto guy when we're sharing our Toronto guy with some other city in the States, right? So there's some that definitely come to mind. I say Roberto Alomar. He's won. You know what he did for the Jays. He got to levels that others haven't. Maybe one of the greatest Jays ever. In hockey, you have Matt Sundin. You know, like, yeah, early he played in Quebec, but he's like a Toronto Maple Leaf.
Right.
In basketball, that's why I kind of preference that, because Vince Carter would be, of all of them, the strongest. But with Vince, you know, he went to Jersey and he made a name for himself in Jersey still. He went elsewhere, and it's kind of hard. You know, ironically, Kyle Lowry played in Houston before he came to Toronto, but he's really made a name. When you think of Kyle Lowry, you don't think of what he did before Toronto. You think of his entire Toronto career, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
So in regards to if I'm going to go with a preference of when you think of the city and who you see, Kyle Lowry's surprisingly walking through this, if I think of someone who's exclusively Toronto and I'm not seeing elsewhere, it's going to be between Kyle Lowry and Roberto Alomar and Matt Sundin. Now, of the three, I narrowed it down to three. Hold on, I'm just walking through my my train of thought. So now that we got those three, if I were to think Toronto, I can't believe I'm saying this, but when I'm thinking Toronto, as much as Roberto Alomar, he's a legend, as much as Matt Sundin, a Leaf legend.
You're picking Kyle?
Am I saying Kyle Lowry?
Wow.
I can't believe I'm saying this.
Neither can I, actually.
Wow. So, I mean, with everyone that you said, right? Matt Sundin played on the Quebec Nordiques, played on the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then went out to Vancouver to end his career.
Right.
Roberto Alomar, he played for the Cleveland Indians as well. Got to play with Sandy Alomar there. With Kyle Lowry, he was obviously in Houston and then came to Toronto, and people forgot that him coming to Toronto was not like the greatest thing, because he was known as sort of like a coach killer, as a guy with a terrible attitude who didn't give you 100% when he was in Houston, and basically we just took on someone else's problem.
Right.
And partnered with DeMar DeRozan, was able to change sort of that mentality and that thought over him, and they began to become like this dynamic duo. Now, the player I chose, and I'm glad that we all sort of stuck to our guns based on the conversation that we had prior, is Vince Carter.
Right.
I think Vince Carter does so much for the city of Toronto. Now, sure, he doesn't win a championship, but if you look at the influence that Vince Carter had on the community, on other NBA players, and on elevating the game in Canada, I don't think anyone has had that same sort of impact in any other sport. Sure, Roberto Alomar affected you, Nelly J, because you got to see him as someone who reminded you of him, not someone who's from the country, but an immigrant to play and represent and exceed at a high level. Matt Sundin is, he's from Sweden, but he looks like every other person who plays the game of hockey. Vince Carter came and really put Toronto on the map. He had this great dunk contest, which really put Toronto on the map in 2000. He had those epic games against AI, Philly, Toronto, going down there and putting them on a playoff sort of map. But he influenced, Kevin Durant as a perfect example. Was Vince Carter. Vince Carter was his favorite basketball player, and what sort of led to Toronto speculating that maybe they had a shot at signing Kevin Durant when, he became a free agent. It never really happened. Drake tried his best at OVO Fest, got fined like $50,000 for it. But Vince Carter was the driving force for people showing up to the Blacktop, to community centers, to local schools to play the game of 3-on-3 or 5-on-5. He also played a sport that didn't require a lot of equipment to be able to play. Hockey, you need tons of equipment. It was an expensive sport. So you sort of priced out some people who were going to be able to play your game. You had to be sort of well off in order to afford it. Baseball, kind of not so expensive, but you needed to rely on a lot more players in order to be able to have a game, right? You need 9 guys on your side, you need 9 guys on the other side. Who's playing a pickup game of with 18 friends? Basketball.
I can't with you.
Basketball, you can put up a net in your backyard. You can go to the school and you can shoot around. You can play and practice and develop and hone your skills by yourself in a way that you can't really do with any other sport. And nowadays, if you start looking through neighborhoods, you can start counting the amount of basketball nets and hoops that you see situated in, the GTA, because that game has changed. What was, not necessarily an avenue that children or youth were choosing to go to the NBA, we're starting to see the Jamal Murrays, the Andrew Wiggins, the Anthony Bennett's, the Kyle Oleneks. Canada is starting to develop their game, and no discredit to Steve Nash, like that's my guy, but he wasn't the one who was elevating and inspiring a generation to now say that the Toronto Raptors are almost even, if not higher, than the Toronto Maple Leafs, and basketball is becoming a sport of Canada, not just hockey. So that's my argument for Vince Carter.
Preach. And you know what? I couldn't agree with you more. Like, honestly, the way you laid it out, beautiful. No, seriously, like that's the breakdown of what you just said makes sense. The only thing I'd have to say is when I think of Toronto, I don't know if I think that Vince, because of the fact he left, and actually no,
and how he left.
No, yeah, but here's my question. Maybe I should ask this.
That kind of makes me like.
Let me throw this question out. When Vince Carter, because he's going to be a Hall of Famer, we all agree. When he goes to Hall of Fame, what team is he going to go in as?
I think he goes in as a Raptor.
I agree with you. I agree because in Jersey he didn't accomplish what he did in Toronto, right? It's just the only thing with Vince. How many years was he? 6 years here in Toronto, approximately.
Something like that.
Something like that. So 6 years, right? So that's still long enough. That's the only reason why I was kind of leaning toward Kyle Lowry, because at least with Kyle Lowry, I like, you think of people who stayed their whole career, like Tim Duncan always in the Spurs, and Kobe with the Lakers. Like certain people are like franchise guys. Yes, Kyle Lowry in Houston, he was there early, but he people don't think of, when you see Kyle Lowry, you see Toronto. You know what I'm saying? Like when I see Vince Carter, I see what he did for Toronto, but I'm not sure if I'm seeing Toronto. But to your point, though, everything you said is correct. So I'll be honest, I feel a lot more comfortable saying Vince Carter than Kyle Lowry. So if you don't mind,
you can't change your answer not anymore.
Well, it's the easier part to this is when you can choose someone whose career is over, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Vince Carter, his career is now over. He's retired.
Fair enough.
Kyle Lowry's interesting because there's a small chance he doesn't finish his career in Toronto. Now, right. Toronto's going to do everything to say, listen, we'll give you the money. We want you to be here.
Million, though, Kyle, you're not getting 33 million.
Well, not if you want to sign Fred at a max deal and you don't worry about paying what you will for Giannis in the future, hopefully. But the idea is that Kyle could still leave, and he could leave on good terms and can leave and play maybe 1 year and that be it. But there is a chance that he leaves, and it's always hard. You're very rarely going to find the Kobe Bryants, who again wasn't even drafted by the Lakers. They traded for him. Tim Duncan, yes, he was longtime Spur. Cal Ripken Jr. for baseball with the Baltimore Orioles. I mean, you don't always get start your career and end your career. And the perfect example of that is Tom Brady. Like, that's my guy. I'm a Patriots fan.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy that he is healthy. Do I wish that Tampa wins the Super Bowl this year? Hell no. I'm riding with my guy Cam because I'm loyal to my team that, put in those, years of making Brady the way that he is now.
Right.
But it's interesting because, again, longevity in a sport with a single team is one of the rarest accomplishments that we don't often see now, especially because sports has gone from a legacy to the fantasy sports kind of way where it's like, I'm going to follow an individual player,
right,
or I'm going to follow individual players for a year, because that's really where we've gone. We've sort of left behind the legacy of, Montreal being won the most Stanley Cups. Guys might just follow a Carey Price, or for the Leafs, they might follow an Austin Matthews. And then when he gets traded or signed somewhere else, that's where the loyalty goes. The loyalty is gone from the team and is gone more for the individual player. And
Perfect.
So
it's funny because I feel like now, I think before people in Toronto were like that, because before we didn't have a lot of sport teams. I think like we didn't have the Raptors for the last, like, people who are Knicks fans are fans from like the 80s and, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our sport team for basketball is very early. So I think the basketball, my friends who grew up with me, most of us weren't Raptor fans because we were more like I was a Bulls fan growing up. I was all MJ and Bulls. You know what I mean? And then after Bulls, I became Chauncey Billups Pistons fan. You know what I mean? Because at the time, Toronto wasn't really doing anything. Yes, I want Toronto to do well, but I wasn't a fan because our team was not saying a damn thing. So I think now, because we've established a culture and having the Jurassic Park and what they've done to make the team a lot more like a family, I think people could say, you know what? I'm a Raptors fan, but hey, I like LeBron. Hey, I like Steph. Hey, I like KD, but I'm a Raptor fan. And I think we see more of those fan loyalty in Toronto more. Second thing is that I feel like Toronto is like a mecca of sports. I feel like Seattle has like what? They only have baseball and football.
They got hockey now.
They got hockey. They got MLS.
Hockey, but like I know, but like their teams are doing like saying what though? Like I feel like
baseball. They got the whole entree.
Yeah, but I feel like we have like so many teams that do so well every year and consistently. I feel like any person will have their own take on the best player. I think dependent on, like you said, right? Like what, like the Carter effect, I think was massive. Like the movie came out and Carter effect not only affected Canada, but affected the entire world. Like what he did, global scale for athletes, for kids growing up. Like you're right. Like, but I think Vince Carter is more of an effect globally more than a Toronto effect. But he did affect that. But I feel like he affected so many people across the globe because what he was doing in his first year in the NBA was insane. And his dunks were like the best, I think probably the best dunks ever, the top 2 or 3 dunks ever to be seen in the dunk contest. So I feel like Vince Carter is just like a very like famous superstar that we got to like see in Toronto. But I don't think, but Toronto, Vince Carter, I'm like, he's not really Toronto because the way he left, I was kind of like, yo, bro, you left so salty. Like, he left so salty. I remember when he came back and played Toronto, how we were booing him and he scored all those points and he was all like, I don't know. That is, that's still in my mind a little bit. So I'm just like, I can't add Vince to my roster because of how he left and how he was behaving when he left.
That's fair.
So 2 quick things. going back to our original point, because as we're speaking, something crossed my mind. So we're talking about Russell Wilson and we're talking about Seattle, which is obviously a fair one, right? What about Ken Griffey Jr. though?
Exactly. Like
no. I'm just throwing it out there. Like
I think Ken Griffey
that's not
was massive in Seattle. Huge.
He was the other name that was thrown up there. So that was sort of the debate was, you know, Ken Griffey and Russell Wilson.
Right.
Ken Griffey was huge.
I was just throwing it out.
Yeah.
So, and another thing with Nelly J, you're talking about the Mecca, right? So there's maybe potential for that in the future, but here's reality. So there's the LA team, the LA. That's like, and LA, New York for sure, right?
Well, yeah.
Then you have those off ones. Then you have Chicago. Then you have Chicago. Chicago's basketball, Blackhawks, hockey. They have they have teams that are winning, right? Then you go. Then you can go to Boston.
Yep.
They have the Celtics and they have the Bruins. Like, in the hierarchy of cities, we're starting to get like a winning feeling.
That's what I was saying,
but if you think about it, like this is a hockey town. Leafs aren't winning anything. You know, Raptors won. We're contending, but I mean, you know, Raptors, Leafs,
but guys,
Blue Jays. You know, we're on the come up.
Like we're on the playoffs though. TFC's in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Jays in the playoffs.
No, I get
right?
it. But,
and compared to others, compared to like Charlotte and other cities, like
for sure.
Toronto's the mecca for Canada alone. But I feel like Toronto is getting up there. Like even I think for the NBA, they said that the most I think like profitable team top for attendance is Toronto. Like if they win one or two.
Yeah, we're in top 5 for sure. It's just I think there's other U.S. cities like those 4 that I mentioned, like Boston, Chicago, L.A., New York. Those are ones that not only are they like they have a winning history. I don't know if Toronto's established we've won the Blue Jays but we haven't established that winning history to be in that conversation yet. That's all.
No, I agree. I mean, like I feel like again, Boston, I think remember most sport teams started out in those big markets. So it's fair to compare LA, New York, like every original league started off in those cities. So they're gonna have way more history than any other city. Toronto, for when we started off and where we are now, I feel like we're doing a lot better compared to those teams like back in the day when they first started off. And I think we're gonna get up there. I feel like Toronto, sports is the money making market. If you're in the sports industry in Toronto and you're in a sports league, you're making money because our fans go to your games. TFC games are always sold off all the time, and our fans are supportive. I've guys like all the time. So I feel like in 5 years, 10 years, we're gonna be that big market sports city for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with what you guys are saying. Toronto is like the mecca of sports in Canada for sure, because it has more teams. It has more teams in more sports than any other province or city in Canada.
Yeah.
Now, $503 million. Okay, this is the number that Patrick Mahomes is going to earn over his 10-year contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it's a lot of money. And we spoke a little bit about, charitable organizations. So to sort of take us out today, give me an organization that if you could help impact, you have to pick one. Now you can't pick 5, but one organization that you would help out with if you had, $503 million that Patrick Mahomes has. What organization would it be, and why is it important to you?
Okay, so I'll take that. 503. So. Definitely, it's the Muslim Global Relief Fund. They're a UK prize winning, like they've won awards for donating to clean water in rural areas and also sanitation also in many parts of the continent of Africa and also like Pakistan, like other, like just areas that where clean water is needed. They're from the UK, but they have roots in those places. And the reason why I chose that is just a little background. Many years ago, I worked at just a part-time job where people would call you and ask for donations over the phone, right? A lot of people would do that, right? So that's what I did. And when I was there, I was just kind of learning, seeing how things are going on, and realizing that someone might say, yeah, I'll donate $50, I'll donate $100, whatever. and the percentage, because it was a call center, a big call center with like say 100 employees, and it's in downtown Toronto. So they have the rent to pay, they have their employees to pay.
Yep.
After everyone gets paid, and you see what goes, I found out a very small percentage is actually going toward the cause, because they have all these expenses. And that's what made me be very apprehensive in regards to giving to these things. I was saying, I'm not going to give my money away just for administrative costs, right? I want to go directly to the source. Right. That's why I did a little bit of research, came across them, and found out they actually have their hands in those places, and the money goes directly to it. And so that's one definitely for clean water and rural. So you can actually have them build a hand water pump. It can serve a small village, and it's only like $400. So it's it's very affordable for people who want to make like not a short-term help, but to get clean drinking water on a regular basis. Something that's the gift that keeps on giving daily for people. At $400, it just makes sense. So that's one, definitely, the Muslim Global Relief Fund. Yep, that's right.
Nice.
That's dope. So for me, last time I did pick the women's shelters, because I think that's a big one. But I'm actually going to change my answer this week, because it's something that I think is even way more, not more important, but more like I want to definitely get more involved in even now, is with hunger.
Right.
A lot of kids go hungry in Toronto, in Canada. And a lot of even like middle class families, kids are going to bed hungry. I grew up as a single mother, and there were times where my mom could like barely afford to give us the things that we need. So I can imagine with my mom, how many kids were also suffering based on just being immigrants, coming to a country, stuff like that. So I definitely want to donate to the food banks in Toronto, because I just feel that food should be like something as a human right. Like no one should ever be hungry for any reason. And I feel like being able to give people groceries, like, vegetables and healthy food. Because, people who are underprivileged or don't have enough money, they're buying a lot of like the bad manufactured food because it's cheaper and it gives people. But those types of milks or eggs are just actually detrimental to your immune system. And that's why with COVID, we're seeing people who are dying from COVID are in underprivileged areas, right?
Right.
So it's being able to feed these folks with actually healthy farm food that they can eat and be able to grow strong. So definitely would be hunger would be my number one charity to support, for sure.
Very good.
Nelly J Faheem, thank you guys again for doing this. This was a phenomenal opportunity. You got to do it twice in 2 days.
We're lucky. We're lucky.
New episodes of Good Rookies podcast every Tuesday. #Good Tuesdays, available wherever you guys get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. Nelly J, hit me with the handles where we can find more Good Rookies.
So anything at Good Rookies. So at Good Rookies, one word. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, we're everywhere. YouTube, we're actually going to drop a website soon as well. So yeah, man, hit us up. We're also on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you want to find a podcast, we're on those platforms. So check us out.
And if they want to follow you on Instagram, what's your Instagram?
Yep. So on Instagram, I am at Nelly_licious. And I actually started a new meme page. Nelly J. If you want to laugh and sip on some tea or some Hennessy, what to sip on? Follow me on Sipping with Nelly J. It's literally hilarious.
What she said. What she said.
And Faheem, even though you don't post, where can we find you on Instagram?
Faheem for the win. Yeah, she's on me. I gotta.
Or the number 4 for the win.
Yeah, so Faheem, the number 4, the win.
Listen, I get it. You got a 6-month-old, baby girl. It's hard to be on Instagram all the time. So I get it, man. I get it.
Don't encourage him. Don't encourage him. Julian, we agreed to be on to post on social media, okay?
You got to get more on it. No, for sure. Listen, I got 2 young kids and I'm still doing it. So listen, thank you guys again for joining me. I appreciate it. I hope that we can connect in the future, not because of, editing or recording errors, but because we can all connect again for some good content. for you guys, good rookies, and the host of the Big O Podcast, Julian Ortiz, thank you everyone for watching and listening. Have a great evening.